Alright, good evening everybody, it's your boy Akeem and welcome to today's vlog. Here to continue with all of my previews for the 2013 college football year. For today, I need to talk about the ACC Conference. I think this is going to be an exciting year, especially for you ACC fans out there. There's a lot of games to watch this upcoming year within this conference. Now, we had some new headline news headed into the season for this conference. We have two new teams from the Big East Conference, the former Big East Conference, which is now called the American Athletic Conference, in Syracuse and Pittsburgh. They were part of the Big East, but they are now with the ACC Conference, which is now a 14-team conference. Syracuse is now part of the Atlantic Division, while the Coastal Division has brought in Pittsburgh. And I'm really intrigued to see what happens for the next upcoming seasons for these two teams. Now, with these two additional teams, there is now going to be scheduled a 9-conference game schedule throughout for the next upcoming seasons in college football within this conference, in which each team with their conference will play all 6 teams of their division, one permanent opponent on the other division, and 2 rotating division games. And I'm really intrigued to see what happens this season. And with this new schedule resume, both Coastal and the Atlantic Division will have a good determined winner to see who will play for the ACC Championship. Now, I have some impact plays for you guys heading towards the season for the ACC Conference. At the quarterback position, I have 2 players I'm going to be looking at. Taj Boyd from Clemson. He had an outstanding year, 3,896 yards passing to go along with 36 touchdowns and 13 interceptions. I think he will be the favorite for ACC Player of the Year this upcoming season. Right behind him at my number 2 quarterback, Brandon Renner out of UNC. He had 28 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. I think he could be a good candidate as well for the ACC Player of the Year. It will be a good match between these two teams if they play in the ACC Championship. At the wide receiver position, I have 2 players I'm going to be looking at. Sammy Watkins from Clemson. He had a down year last season, 708 yards receiving as a sophomore, and compared to over 1,000 yards as a true freshman. Now, with DeAndre Hopkins out, Watkins is going to have to step it up this year, and he is still an impact player as a receiver as well as special teams. And also, the second receiver I need to talk about is Alex Amenden out of BC, Boston College. He was actually one of the leading receivers of the ACC Conference. He had 1,210 yards receiving and 7 touchdowns. He is their best offensive weapon for the Golden Eagles. Now, on the defensive side, I have 2 players in particular I'm going to be looking at as my impact players. First, from Georgia Tech, Jeremiah Atachu. He was actually third in the ACC last season with 10 sacks. And at the cornerback position, Antoine Exum out of Virginia Tech. He had 69 tackles last season, and he also had 16 pass breakups as well as 5 interceptions. He had a great year, and I think he could make a run for the ACC Defensive Player of the Year headed towards the end of the season. He's definitely going to help lead that defense, who is returning 10 of 11 starters from last season. Now, some breakout players for you guys. I think I have a nice group for you guys. First, I have some players that showed a little bit of spark last season, and I think they're going to bust loose this year, and as well as some players that I think needs to step up this season, and I think they can have breakout as well as comeback seasons this upcoming year. First, at the quarterback position, a player who needs to step it up this year and from last year's down season, quarterback Logan Thomas out of Virginia Tech. He had 18 touchdowns and 16 interceptions last season. Yes, count them. 16 interceptions. He needs to lower that interception touchdown ratio. I think he can still be a good quarterback, and even headed towards last season, he was a good NFL prospect, but because of that down year, he had to come back as a senior and hopefully lead the Hokies to an ACC championship. A quarterback who had a good spark last season, and I think that he can have a breakout year, and that is Stephen Morris out of the U. He had 21 touchdown passes and just 7 interceptions to go along with 3,345 yards passing last season. Now, last year, he showed a little bit better poise as well as more comfort in throwing the football, and I think he can have a breakout senior year. Now, at the running back position, I have 2 players in particular. First, sticking with Miami, Duke Johnson, who had 947 yards last season, respectively 30 in the ACC rushing, and he was the ACC Rookie of the Year. He had a great year offensively, and Coach Al Golden, the head coach for the Miami Hurricanes, says that he's going to get at least 7 more touches per game this upcoming year. So I think he's going to have at least 1,000 yards rushing if he does not get hurt this upcoming year. Now the second running back I'm going to be looking at, he was actually second in the team in rushing, and that is Roderick Dow from Clemson. Now last season, Andre Ellington led the team in rushing with over 1,000 yards, and behind him was Dow. And I think that Dow could bust loose this year and carry the bulk of the load, and even while some NFL scouts for the 2014 NFL Draft. Sticking with Clemson, headed over to the defensive side, Vic Beasley, he had 8 sacks last season, and he missed just about half of last year due to injuries and also other off-the-field issues. But I think he will be back this year, and he will bring the tenacity this year and help out that defense, who does need some help, particularly even in that secondary. So he's going to have to disrupt some passes to help out that secondary a lot. I made a mistake. I forgot to mention one particular player on the offensive side, Stephon Diggs out of Maryland. Now he's from Gaithersburg. He went to Good Counsel High School, just around the corner from where I live. I even personally saw him play. This kid is a beast, and he will have over 1,000 yards this season in my prediction. He is the only offensive weapon for the Maryland Terps, and I think he will be due for another great season. He was actually second in the ACC Rookie of the Year last season behind Duke Johnson. Now I have 3 players in particular that I think they need to step it up this year and have breakout performances. At Florida State, Timmy Jernigan. Now he did get some tackles last season, but I needed to see more sacks, be better of a pass rusher, and stuff that line of scrimmage. And I saw so much potential of him coming out of high school. I think he could be doing well this upcoming year. He's one of 4 returning starters for that defense, so I'm going to have to see him step it up this year. And for Clemson, 2 linebackers I'm going to be looking at, and they better step it up this year in order to help Clemson win a make it to the national championship, and that is Tony Stewart and Stephen Anthony. Now I mentioned a couple of years ago when these 2 players came out of high school, I thought that Clemson was going to have a dynamic, sick linebacking core, and Spencer Suey, who led the team in tackles, was actually outperforming both of those 2 players. If these 2 players step it up, Clemson can make a run for the national championship. So those are all my breakthrough players for the 2013 season in the ACC Conference. Now I have a couple of incoming freshmen for you guys, 4 in particular that I do like a lot for these teams, for this conference. Starting at Florida State, Matt Thomas. Now Matt Thomas is coming into a great defense who had a great performance last season. They were actually 6th nationally in scoring, 3rd against the run, and 1st against the pass. But defensive coordinator Jeremy Pruitt is going to have to play without 7 of those 11 starters. Like I mentioned before, only 4 returning starters on that defensive side. And this is going to be a great opportunity for Matthew Thomas to start right away. The door is wide open. He can start right away at outside linebacker. And one of those 4 returning starters is a linebacker, but Matthew Thomas can still play outside linebacker and get a lot of tackles and more experience as a true freshman. Sticking with the defensive side, from the Clemson Tigers, Mackenzie Alexander, the cornerback, he was actually the number 4 overall player in the ESPN Top 100. And Clemson's secondary desperately needed some help. They were actually ranked 73rd overall in college football last season, and with the addition of Alexander, he could definitely boost up an upgrade for that secondary and help them out right away as a true freshman and help bring this team to an undefeated season and a national championship. But they have a tough schedule ahead, and I will let you know more about the schedule coming towards the end of this video. Now on the offensive side, going back to Daquan Mizzle for the Virginia Cavaliers. He's actually coming out of Virginia Beach, Virginia. He's a good running back, a good speedster, 185 pounds, and he did show a little bit of spark of that in that Army All-American game. And I do like this kid a lot. I think he could start coming towards the end of the season, and I think because of the changes a little bit offensively with the Virginia Cavaliers, they no longer have Phillip Sims at quarterback. They're going to have to come up with new players, and they still have Parks, the leading rusher, but still, I think that Mizzle could be that starting running back coming towards the end of the season and win ACC Rookie of the Year, but we will see. And the other running back I need to talk about, TJ Logan out of UNC. Now, Giovanni Bernard no longer with the team, but they still have some experience with experienced players like AJ Blue, who should get that starting nod coming towards the beginning of the season. But TJ Logan should get some opportunities to carry the load and help out on the running backs overall. Even though Blue will get some carries, I think that Logan could get some experience. So I'm going to have to keep an eye on him as an incoming freshman. That's why I had to put him on this list. Now, I have some games for you guys. A couple of non-conference games, big non-conference games in this ACC conference, as well as some good in-conference games. Starting for in-conference games, on October 5th, UNC is going to be playing at Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech lost to the Tar Heels last season, so they're looking to avenge that loss at Blacksburg. On October 17th, Miami is going to be playing against UNC. That's going to be an important game to watch in the Coastal Division. October 17th, Clemson's going to be hosting FSU. That game can determine the Atlantic Division of the ACC title. November 2nd, Miami's going to be playing against Florida State, a good in-state rivalry, and we've seen a lot of big games between the U and FSU, but this game's going to be played in Tallahassee. November 9th, Virginia Tech's going to be playing at Miami. This is another important game to watch in that Coastal Division. That's going to be a great game to watch. Now, I have 5 non-conference games, big non-conference games in this ACC conference. On August 29th, UNC is going to be traveling to South Carolina to face the Gamecocks. This is going to be their first game of the season, and this is going to be a big test right off the bat against a great South Carolina defense. August 31st, Clemson is going to be playing against Georgia. Georgia has a very high explosive offense, particularly in the passing attack, with Aaron Murray leading the way at quarterback. And I mentioned before, Clemson's defense was 73rd last season against the pass. So Vic Beasley's going to have to step it up, and Alexander's going to have to play right away in the first game as a true freshman and help out that secondary and pull off a good win. Hopefully they can go undefeated at the end of the season. September 17th, Miami's going to be playing against Florida, another great in-state rivalry game. And on November 30th, 2 games in particular that everybody should look at for that same date. FSU, Florida's going to be playing at Florida. Florida State's going to be playing at Florida. That's another in-state rivalry matchup, as well as another big rivalry in college football. Clemson's going to be playing at South Carolina. Clemson's going to start and end their season against an SEC opponent, and if this team go undefeated, they should automatically get a bid to the national championship. No questions asked. No matter how many teams go undefeated at the end of the year, if Clemson goes undefeated, they should definitely get an automatic bid because they beat 2 SEC opponents. So that's the wrap things up with all the big games. I'm here to give you some of my predictions of the awards at the end of the year, like I did with my previous videos. Offensive Player of the Year, I'm going to go with Tajh Boyd out of Clemson. I think he could lead this team to another good season. 1, maybe 2 losses at most, but we will see. I will give you my prediction later on, but I think he's going to be the ACC Player of the Year. Defensive Player of the Year, I'm going to stick with Antoine Exum out of Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech's defensive back, this player, I think he's going to have another good season, and he can definitely wow some NFL scouts for this upcoming NFL draft. Defensive Rookie of the Year, I'm going to go with Taquan Mizzle out of Virginia because I think he will have the opportunity right off the bat as a true freshman and lead this team in rushing and get a lot of reps. Defensive Player of the Year, the same situation. I'm going to go with Matthew Thomas out of Florida State because they've lost so many players. This has the door wide open and get to give Matthew Thomas an opportunity to play right away early as a true freshman and possibly start coming towards the middle to the end of the season. So I'm going to have to go with both those players as my defensive and offensive Rookie of the Year. Coach of the Year, this was a toss-up for me, but I'm going to go with Larry Fedora out of North Carolina. I think because of North Carolina's schedule, they have a pretty favorable schedule. They do have to worry about South Carolina. If they beat South Carolina and if they have a couple of tough matches between Virginia Tech and Miami. If they split those games and beat South Carolina and win the remaining of their games, in which is very favorable for the Tar Heels, I think that Larry Fedora can become the Coach of the Year. Unless Clemson goes undefeated, it should definitely go to Dabo Swinney. And if Clemson does go undefeated, Dabo Swinney should definitely get Coach of the Year nationally. So I'm going to have to stick with him, with Fedora for now, for Coach of the Year. Now the winner overall, I'm going to go with Clemson over North Carolina. I think in the Atlantic Division, it's going to be between FSU and Clemson. And for the Coastal Division, it's going to be between Virginia Tech and UNC. I had to go with UNC over Tech because even though Logan Logan Thomas is one of my breakthrough players. He's going to have to perform well without two of his leading targets, and I think that's going to be a tough loss coming towards the game against North Carolina. I think North Carolina should win that game, so I have to go with UNC over Tech for the Coastal Division, and I think that Clemson has enough skill offensively to outbreak Florida. And I mentioned Roger Dow, but I even think at the receiver position, Sharon Peake can step up at the receiver position and work well opposite of Sammy Watkins. They have a high explosive offense, talking about Clemson, and I think they should be able to beat a rebuilding Florida defense. So I'm going to have to go with Clemson over UNC for the ACC title. Now, my sleeper in this conference, I'm going to have to go with one of the new teams, Syracuse. I'm going to have to go with the Orangemen with this one because they have two good running backs who can have breakout seasons as well, and Prince Gully as well as Jerome Smith. Jerome Smith had over 1,000 yards leading the team in rushing, while Gully had 830 yards rushing. I think both these two players could become a good tandem and a good sleeper in the ACC conference, helping them wreaking some havoc and even pulling off a couple of upsets. So I'm going to have to go with Syracuse as my sleeper of the year of the ACC conference. Now, the next time I'm going to catch you guys is on Wednesday, where I will give you a preview of the American Athletic Conference, the new conference formerly known as the Big East. Thank you for watching today's vlog. I'm your man, Akeem McCall. Be easy.